50% of women abandon their careers in tech by the age of 35.
We think that's unacceptable, and it's exactly why we started this podcast.
I'm Jo Keneally, tech veteran and writer.
And I'm Jarisha Nadaraju, product ops leader and startup advisor.
We're The Other Half, a podcast for ambitious women navigating their way.
This episode is brought to you by PCX Pay, helping businesses move money across borders with speed, clarity, and control. Simplify your payments infrastructure at pcxpay.com. We've partnered with Clue for Season 3 of The Other Half. Clue is the science-backed period and cycle tracking app that helps you understand your body, from cycle predictions and hormone insights to fertility tracking and mood patterns. As a listener of The Other Half, you have exclusive access to a whole free year of Clue Plus. Just head to the link in the show notes to claim it.
In today's episode, we're joined by Clémentine Markman, Head of Operations at Granola. We discuss founding operations as a role, on how to be AI fluent without losing your judgment, and the challenges of making operations visible. Hi, Clémentine. Welcome to the podcast. We're really excited to have you here today. We're going to jump straight into it, if that's okay with you.
Sure, yeah.
So you've had an interesting career because you were a lawyer before you moved into operations roles at startups. And then you joined Granola about a year and a half ago as founding ops. And Granola, for anybody who doesn't know, it is an AI note-taking app and probably a lot more that has scaled incredibly quickly. And last I heard had a 1.5 billion valuation. So very successful very quickly. Before we kind of jump into the day-to-day of the role, I'd love to know, what does it actually mean to be a founding operations hire? And what does that look like?
Yeah, sure. So I think it means, the word founding means to join like really early stage. So in my case, it was like I was the first person in operations at Granola. I joined when we were 8. And more generally, founding ops means, I would say, like turning chaos into leverage. And in terms of what you do, if you wanted to summarize, it's sort of connecting the dots in the background so that the company can run smoothly. And it means wearing many hats as well. So going from that can go from legal, compliance, people ops, business ops, finance, building systems, and even for me, like building and managing the office at the beginning. So you have to be ready every day to just switch from one area to another, from one problem to another in like super diverse areas. And I think also solving problems, because there's always the work you plan and then the things you don't plan that come your way. So it's a lot of firefighting as well and problem solving.
Great, thank you. I'm curious to know, how did you know that Granola was a good company to join? Because early stage companies they can go lots of different ways, shall we say. Some are very successful, some not. And you were employee number 8. How did you know it was going to be a good decision for you?
Well, I didn't know. And as you, from my background, like the 4 companies I've done before didn't make it for after 2 years. So I think it's kind of the statistics of startups, and you can't really be sure. I mean, I had a bit more good signals with Granola because I joined post Series A. So the company was already valued at 80 million. So I think that was good signals. I knew there was already a product that was already live for customers. So there were like some very good signals. The CEO has sold his previous company to Google. So I thought like all that, and the team was really great, like great engineers. So I think, yeah, there were lots of green signals, but then there is also like lots of uncertainty in general in early stage startup.
Sure. Product live is definitely a good signal. Like when you see it's a real thing, that is usually a good sign.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, so, you cover lots of different areas of ops, and sometimes things go to plan and sometimes they very much don't. How do you decide what to prioritize and how to, I guess, plan an ops function when you're literally building everything from scratch? Is there like a framework you adhere to, or is it more instinctual in your case?
I think it's a bit of both. So I think in general, you sort of look at risk because, in ops, you need to manage risk. So you think about what's the most risky now to decide what you should handle. You look at repetitive and manual work so that you can create automation and a process so it doesn't slow you down. Also, what is blocking growth and what would save people time in the team. So I think all that are criteria you look at when you decide to prioritize. Then you can also use the 8-hour matrix to do like important urgent work, because of course there are always things that are very urgent. So for instance, just after I joined, we had to switch office, so that was priority because the team was growing. There was not enough space, and for instance, sometimes it can be very practical. Like when we switched office, we didn't have the BT box that was stuck with somewhere with Royal Mail too, so the team couldn't get internet. So that's those things like a small practical thing, but becomes priority. Or it can also be like dealing with more recently with the lawyers to close the Series C round. So I think it's also like not being scared from like going into very like practical thing that can be a little bit sometimes boring, to doing more intellectual stuff from time to time. But between that, deciding not about like what you want to do the most, but what will block growth or what will create risk.
Yeah, I was nodding along as you were saying all of that, Clementine, because I was the first ops hire into a startup, but that was like 8 years ago. So a very different landscape. But it's anything and everything that's required to get the business to move day to day, right? So it's almost like you can't really have that short-term, long-term thinking about, which fire do I do now? But then I know I need to prioritize problems for the longer term to solve them, because you kind of have to solve things right now, to get you moving to the next stage. It just depends like which fire you're going to pick, like which one's the biggest. So yeah, it's a real mix. And you, like you're saying, you can't be afraid to like get your hands dirty and like dive in and actually fix some things that are maybe not what you thought you would be looking at, but now you've got to deal with it because it's a problem that exists. So it's great that you have that mindset.
Yeah, and I think it's also as you evolve, I think as you join the company, especially me as the first ops hire, the CEO and the chief of staff who were, the other co-founder was sort of together dealing with ops. They were so happy to hand over to me. And I think at the beginning, it's just like you a lot more in firefighter reactive mode. And as it evolves, I think now, also now that I've been able to hire more people, like internally and externally, I think I can go more in like proactive work, more strategic, and that becomes a lot more interesting as well, and a lot less stressful, I would say. So there's still like a part of firefighting, but instead of being 100% of my time, now it's maybe like 20 to 30%, and the rest is more strategic and more planned work.
Oh, that's really interesting to note the switch in like the percentage, like initially when you started, and now maybe that is not consuming you as much, and you're able to now switch into this like not being so reactive mode. I think one of the things I was interested in finding out kind of linked to that is, Clementine, like how do you build processes that are robust enough to work at scale, but flexible enough not to slow down a fast-moving startup, right? Because you've now got to strike that balance between what do you do?
Yeah, so I would say, in some ways it's a bit like Granola itself, like engineers build a product. Like I think we have a rule at Granola to always do like a MVP first, like not wait until you have the perfect feature, the perfect product. You sort of ship, at least in beta version internally, like MVP first. You try it, you hear feedback, you reiterate, and like we always say like ship bricks instead of shipping the whole wall straight away. So I think in processes and in general at Granola, we like to be really lightweight on process. So I think I always have this mindset of the process, like the user of the process shouldn't even feel like there is a process, a bit like the user of Granola doesn't see all the work that goes in the background to make Granola user interface look really simple for the user. So I think about process this way, like I create a process that the team would barely see, but it would make their work more efficient and faster, rather than having something really bureaucratic that the team would be like, oh no, we have to follow this process. So for me, that means it's not a good process. And I think another thing is like, I really focus on choosing the right tools, because I think it's more difficult to change tools than to change and adapt a process. and focus on choosing the right external partners. So where you need a specific expertise and you have to pick external partners, I also put a lot more like time and due diligence and effort into finding the right person, because I think it's also a lot of effort to switch that. But I think once you have the right tool and the right partners where you need to, the process itself can be constantly adapted, and it's a lot easier to reiterate and adapt on an internal process.
That's really interesting. Your first point resonated with me so much. So it's almost like you take this product management mindset to how you approach process and operations, right? Which is one of the things I do say with my team, and I've said at other companies, is it's minimum viable process, so MVP, similar thing, and let's try and just ship like the first version of the process instead of trying to do a perfect end-to-end flow chart and diagram that nobody's going to adopt. So I really like that you say that. Yeah, Clementine, on the tool side, I think that's so interesting because I have almost seen so many different types of tools at companies, and sometimes you can influence them, sometimes you can't, because it's already there. And so I've almost taken this approach of being like tool agnostic, where I don't mind, what the tooling is, we'll figure it out. But like it's more important to almost get the process right or map that out, and then we'll see how you support that. But I guess what you're saying is the other way around.
It's also because in this company, at least I was able to build like choose all the tools from scratch for the operational part. Of course, the engineers choose the tools they use. So I think it's probably a bit of a luxury, and also that we were not specifically limited on budget because we've raised funding and we scale really fast. I think the idea is, if you can find a tool that will save you time or save the team time, you can go for it. And I'm still super conservative in like how many tools I use, because I always like to think, if I use this tool, will it work with, I don't want to have like too many tools, too much overlap, and also I really think about the whole architecture. But then I think it depends. If you arrive in a company where the tools are already there, then I guess I would adapt to that and work more on the process. In that case, if I'm able to choose the tools, I think it can make a difference into your workflow, and like if it's specifically for you and your team, how your workflow works and how quick that is.
Great. Well, speaking about Granola and the type of company it is an AI native product company, builds AI into the core of what it does. So I'm curious about how does that change the way you approach operations compared to a traditional tech startup, that doesn't have that AI focus?
Yeah, I've seen a big difference with all my previous startup. The big difference is speed. I think the company in general everything goes so much faster because everyone is faster at their work, and also we scale really fast. So even when you see like how the team grows and all the features we build, etc., I think it's just like 10 times more almost than everything I've seen in previous company. It also means my work can go a lot faster. So I feel like in 1 year and a half, I've done the work I could have done like pre-AI in like maybe 5 years or something like that. I think I've done so much more, because instead of lots of things that would take me before AI like 3 days to do, it takes me now like 30 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hours, something like that. So I think there's a huge difference. I can give you a recent example. For instance, I'm hiring now for people ops, and in the past I would have built a case study like myself. I would have researched a little bit, different case studies, think about what I want to do and all. Now I've just asked Granola, can you create a case study for me? And because Granola has all the context about all the company and all my meetings and all, and created something super tailored to Granola. So it took me only a few iterations, and I think in 30 minutes I had the exact case study I wanted. So that's the kind of stuff that, it goes a lot faster, but because the whole team works like that a lot faster, things move really quickly. And sometimes it's really exciting, can be also a lot more tiring, I would say, because it still means that you go fast, but you have to understand everything you do. So it still takes time for your brain, I think, to absorb all this, like another recent example is I had to deal with the whole like granting options to employee, which is something I had never done before in my life. So I had to understand how the old system works, like how do you do like a company evaluation with HMRC, like the company evaluation in the US, talking to the lawyer, to like the what are the different tax scheme, understanding the strike price, all this stuff. So in some ways I could go very fast with the AI, but I still had to like absorb and understand all this. So it's always making sure you understand and stay alert while still moving at speed that's expected.
It's so interesting what you say about the speed. It's actually a conversation that Teresa and I had over the weekend where we both used to work at BizOps in the same company. It's how we met. And I was thinking about one of the tasks I was given, which was to do like a competitor analysis. And that honestly at the time probably would have taken a week plus. I recently did a similar thing for a different company using like an AI agent. It was Super Agent, if anyone's interested. And it did the whole thing in 17 minutes, which is crazy, right? Something that would have taken a few days is now in 17 minutes. However, to your point, I then felt like I had to be like evaluating it. And I feel like my job with AI is now becoming almost like a full-time fact checker rather than doer. How do you deal with that in practice? Like, how do you actually evaluate the quality is good and also that the things are real? Do you have any tips there?
I think in general, I'm still very pragmatic down to earth, just so that I'm always super like paranoid and super, I won't say like, I trust it. And so I think even with AI, first I make sure I really understand everything. I always ask lots of follow-up questions, reiterate to have like something that's more like what I want. And I think I see it as just like helping me with the things I don't want to do in the execution, but I still make sure I stay on top of the like my analytical skills and critical thinking. So that's, I think that's really that human part and analytical part you want to keep, and that's the AI should be only like your very junior execution, all the stuff that otherwise would have been time consuming and not really interesting, basically.
I can see the lawyer mindset coming out there of like, don't trust it until you verified yourself because it can go very wrong. But speaking of, I guess, that speed, like AI does move incredibly fast. Even like if you think of 3 months ago, we now all have access to a lot of different capabilities that we didn't. But also those like tools that we use, they change, right? Models change, pricing structure changes, like usage tariffs change, and like the amount you can use Claude, for example, more recently has changed, which has impacted how I work. When you think about all those changes that are still happening, because it is like a young ecosystem, how do you build operational stability into your like processes when the market and products can change so quickly?
I think it's about adaptability rather than stability, because it's more about like the ways of working, because since you always have to adapt to everything, I would say, for instance, the thing I still really focus on and that are really important with the team, for instance, is like always like having very clear ownership, project management. I think especially as the company scale, making sure you always bring people together. I find it like now a lot more difficult, and it requires more effort, and it's interesting as well, but to bring team from like put together teams from different people and making sure there is an owner and a leader, so that the project goes through the end. Making the right decision. And I think it's not so much about stability in some ways, because we're moving very fast and things change so quickly all the time, that it's more about like adapting things. And from my side, there is also the big like risk, because I'm in operation manage risk. So I think it's also always about like checking risk, and especially with an AI product, always looking at compliance and legal and making sure we pick up everything. So I think communication and information is really important as well. And for that, of course, we're really privileged at Granola, because as Granola is all about creating context and everyone has their meeting on Granola. Luckily, we have lots of context on the company that's quite easy to grasp compared to some other companies I've been at before. And also the advantage of working in person. So I think we lose a lot less on context than some other company. But I know in previous company, it's been one of the main struggle as you scale, is always making sure everyone has the right information and you have like clear communication and information loop. Yeah, I don't know if that responds to your question. Hopefully it does.
Yeah, I think it did. It did answer what Joe was asking. And you touched on so many points. I did a talk yesterday on streamlining operations to a group of founders. And one of the things I spoke about was that alignment piece. You know, as you're scaling and as you're adding each additional person, the number, you know, there's so much of alignment that then ends up having to happen, and making sure that people understand the what, why, how of your company. You don't just assume that there is this understanding, and also ownership, right? If you don't know who's supposed to decide and do what, founders become the bottleneck, nothing gets done, there's no accountability. So it's so important to set those things up to get, in a way, that version of stability as you're moving through different things. So that's great stuff that you touched on. When we think about AI more, one of the other things that we've heard people talk about is AI fluency. And so it's this idea that everyone, you know, not just engineers, needs to understand and be able to work effectively with AI and know how to interact with it. So how do you think AI fluency will change, you know, what's expected of people in operations and maybe strategy and leadership over the next few years?
Yeah, I think so. A bit linking that to the previous question, I think what's expected is a lot more speed, and it's expected that you'll use AI tool. And I was saying, like, even when I recruit someone and if I give a case study, I expect that they use AI tools. And what I want to see in that case, it's more about like what is your judgment, how to set up workflow. For instance, I don't think that's something AI can do yet. So in operations, it's something you're supposed to be good at is setting up workflows. So I think there is still a lot of space here for humans to do this, to like choose the right tools and architecture to make sure so you don't get into like AI inflation, because I think there are so many AI tools now that you could think, oh, I'm going to get AI tool for this. But in the end, it's all about, you should still have the same thinking that you have as an operator, which is when you choose a tool, which problem am I trying to solve, and which is the best tool, what is the best tool to solve those problems. So I think it remains the same with AI tools, is don't get into buying any tool without like first thinking which problem do I need to solve, or what will make my work more efficient and save me time or save time for the team. So I think it's still the same thinking behind it, but of course there is an expectation that you shouldn't be doing time-consuming manual work when you could have an AI that would do that work quickly. So I would say the minimum would be like always, of course, like for ChatGPT and Claude, and then a tool like, of course, like Granola. I'm not promoting specifically Granola, but what we hear from users as well is just like how they can't live without Granola anymore, because I think once you get used to have Granola in all your meetings and you get used to focus on the person and what the person say and actually what you want to say, rather than focusing on taking notes and being a bit like not really present in the meeting. I think people get used to that. They really enjoy it. They enjoy being more present in the meeting, and then they enjoy, it's not so much about reading your meeting notes after the meeting. It's more about having all this context that sits there and that you can use with the chat as and when you need it. And yeah, I think that's what people really enjoy, because sometimes you have a meeting and then you might not think about it, like you might think about it only 3 weeks later, and then sometimes you have also repetitive meeting like with the same lawyers or whatever, and it's only as and when you need the context much later that you would want to go back into this and being able to retrieve all the information from a specific point you discussed or something. I think it's really helpful, and once people get used to that, they can't really live without it, just like most people who use ChatGPT or Claude then can't really live without it. I think it's so some of the tools are definitely really helpful. Then I haven't used all AI tools. There are so many on the market that, again, it mostly depends which problems you want to solve. And I think there are also lots of tools that do something and then they have AI on the side. It might or might not be good. It sort of depends. I would say it's something to try, and lots of time we don't even use it. But yeah, there is certainly a lot more expectation around that. But to come back to your question, I think that you still need like decision making, judgment, workflow, analytical thinking. So you still need all your human skills around AI to make it work efficiently.
Has it impacted, or do you think it's going to impact like how many? I mean, obviously, it's maybe already doing this. I don't know, like how many people you'd need on an ops team, for example, to run it well, or you think you still need people who are going to be able to bring things together and help with that alignment and that communications and processes from a human point of view?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's less people probably on the more like execution. In some ways it's also like leveraging people. So you could also think like it helps us scale faster, and then because the cake becomes bigger, we also hire more. So it's always like this thing. It's a bit the same with the economy. Like, should you divide the work, or should you just make it more productive, and then it creates more work? I think it's a bit this idea, and it's the whole debate currently with AI is like, is AI going to kill job, or is it going to make like the whole world better and more productive because we just delegate all the work that's not really interesting to the AI, and we focus on more strategic and more interesting work, and we just work less in general. So I think it's the main debate is about whether you see AI as a positive thing or as a negative thing. I prefer to see it as a positive thing, and think like, for me, I see it as delegating the work I would not want to do anyway, or would less enjoy doing, and focusing on what's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, just to jump in on that. So it's something I've been thinking about a lot because back to your original point about speed, you can do so much more with AI much quicker now. But that doesn't always mean doing more is actually the best thing for the business, or that, because you can do so much more so much quicker, in many ways people can move in different directions much more quickly as well. So I'm wondering, in such a fast moving company, like, does the standard having, a yearly plan with like these strategic points you're trying to hit and then like quarterly OKRs, do you find that that's still relevant, or does like planning become a much shorter cycle because everybody can move so much quicker?
We still have quarterly OKRs that are quite ambitious, I think. We always ready to adapt them as needed. I think we still manage to plan pretty well where we want to go, especially with the product, and because we have the expectation that I think high level we know roughly where we want to go with the product, and then probably we adapt more into like the lower the next level, and so in the details if you want.
Well, maybe I'm being a little bit cynical because I've definitely been scarred by people bringing their pet projects into work, and so I think when you have that like collective vision, it does really help, even if you're moving quickly, to just make sure that you're all going in that same direction.
Yeah, no, we definitely. I mean, I would say now, like both the co-founders are fully focused on both co-founders are really focused on the product, and there is really this vision. I think the fact that we also work fully in person helps a lot, because we are every day in the office in London, and so I think it's all about building the product. I mean, for all the engineers and product team, and for the non-product like me, we focus on making the company run smoothly. But I think it works well, and there is still so much to do. The other thing I would say about AI, and especially what we do, we know we are in a very competitive space, of course, and AI in general is new, it's super innovative, it's only the beginning, and I think there's also a part that's super exciting being part of it, and everyone is really excited to be building about it. So yeah, people wouldn't do side project, because if anything, they would more like work for Granola, even when they're on holidays, on trying like new things and new feature. And I think another thing about the company is like, it's a lot about hiring people who are quite entrepreneurial and owners. And so lots of features we developed, they came from an idea of an engineer who thought like, oh, this would be a great idea. Like every Friday we do demos, and sometimes engineers just present an idea they've developed an MVP on their own without being told what to do. And lots of the time it's a great idea, and then we keep it and we move it to development and it's really actually exciting and interesting to see how everyone wants to build Granola and a better product and better features. And of course, then there is still a lot of it's more like there are too many ideas of things we could do, and I think then there's a big filters, of course, from the co-founders to decide on what will go out so that Granola remains still like a really nice, user-friendly, clean product, and there are not too many different things all over the place.
Very interesting, especially, just that you still have this, planning muscle and it hasn't changed dramatically in this new landscape. Clémentine, I was curious about, because Joe and I both worked in operations. I work in product operations now, but I at some point was in biz ops and I've been a chief of staff. But, careers in ops can sometimes feel invisible. And because you're making everything run, but you're not always the person that is front and center. You're often enabling or being like a catalyst or, maybe sometimes in the background. How do you advocate for yourself and make your impact visible, especially as a woman in these environments?
Yeah, it's true. It's always what I say about operations. I always say, if you don't notice me, it means I do a good job. And I always think like it's quite the opposite, like with marketing. For instance, it's always like, oh, wow, marketing has done this campaign and all this thing, and everyone sees it. And if you don't see anything in marketing, it's less of a good sign. And then on that, I don't think I would give any tips because I'm probably not the best myself at promoting myself. And it's not my favorite thing to be bragging or at the front on the stage and all. So yeah, I think it's something I want to develop more, but like communicating better. I think as women we're not really trained to communicate super well about like what we do. We tend to more like do things rather than communicate about things, and that's something I see a lot as well when I interview people. I think if I interview a man, lots of time they would, even if they don't know how to do it, they would say yes, of course, and all, while a woman would always have like disclaimer about, oh, I haven't really done this and all. And so yeah, I think it's more like the way we educated, and it's good to rethink about that and how to try to communicate better. So I think if I was to do it better, I would communicate better on the wins in operations, we've reduced this cost by X%, or sometimes I do that, or sometimes if you get like, I don't know, I got SOC 2 certification, it's quite a visible win. So sometimes you have things that are visible anyway, or closing Series C and working with the lawyers to close Series C. Sometimes things are visible anyway, and you think everyone in the company would say it. Sometimes you probably need a bit more. I might be like saving lots of cost, but might not communicate about it, and I should probably do that sometimes when I save money.
Yeah, I was thinking one of the things that I've tried to do now, because I also do feel, I agree with you about where I do think, if you are in the background and making things run better and people aren't really seeing you there doing it, but you know that you're enabling it, that's great. I think I take it one step further now. So I do make sure that at the very least, my manager, so at least the person I'm reporting into, fully sees what's going on behind the scenes. So, to everybody else, it may be a real positive thing, but they don't know that we've done it. But, my manager or the person I'm reporting to needs to know that all of this went in and we did all of this to do that. So I try and communicate those things up or make that clear at the very least.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to do. I try to do it more as well, but sometimes I think, oh, I forgot to mention this or this, and yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought in operations roles, like, you don't get rewarded for the fires that didn't happen because of your work, but sometimes I feel like you should. But it's really hard to say that. It's like, because of this process, we didn't have these incidents that may have happened, but it's how do you quantify that? I wish there was some sort of like internal benchmark of bad companies or something.
Yeah, it's true. And I tend to be paranoid and think like three steps ahead about everything that could potentially happen with the if. But yeah, so I guess luckily I probably anticipated lots of problems and avoided them. But sometimes it's not even clear to me what I avoided by anticipating so much.
Yeah, that is, startups normally attract optimists, and one of the things about being an optimistic person is you do tend to like discount the bad sides because you're like, oh no, it's all good. One of the things I'm quite curious about is, you mentioned quite a few times that operations is very much about like controlling risk or managing risk within an organization. And I think especially when you have ambitious teams who want to move quickly, operations can sometimes feel like a blocker to them, even if actually it is for that greater good of like making sure that the company is stable and has a good reputation long term. How do you think about, I guess, messaging that tension internally that yes, we do want to move quickly, but we do need to think about risk? Do you have kind of an approach to that?
Yeah, it's funny. On that, I've noticed that if the risk aligns with the customer, what the customer is thinking about risk, it really helps me because then we align with then it means it's a blocker for sales and they also push for that. So we sort of together. So for instance, like when we wanted to do SOC 2, which is a great thing to do anyway for the business as a compliance side, and it was also aligning with sales who had like some customers blocked by not having SOC 2. So lots of time I try to align with sales, so it really helps me if we have like the same goals. And I would say, yeah, if it's not aligned with some customers' requests or something, I try to insist more about like the risk if we don't do it, and then it takes me like more time. Like, look, if it's not because we've not been sued, or like if we don't do this, it creates this risk, and sometimes then you need to escalate maybe to the project manager, the CTO, to make sure like they can allow time for that and they know it's important. So yeah, I think and then it takes more internal discussion and conviction by just flagging what could happen if you don't do this.
It makes sense. We actually had a previous guest where she's, her background is product, and she was saying your product strategy is your revenue strategy. And I feel like as operations people actually, speaking up and saying, your operation strategy does also impact your revenue strategy because, it might not directly cause sales, but not having it may cause you to lose sales in future. I think this can definitely kind of help with the messaging as well. Final question on my side. If listeners of this episode are interested in becoming a founding ops person or actually even finding founding operations roles, what are 2 or 3 things you would recommend that they do?
Yeah, I think it's about being able to sort of navigate chaos. I think there's one aspect also that is to be like very pragmatic and down to earth, and that's something that's really important when I'm recruiting, because I see so many like super smart intellectual people, but you think they wouldn't be necessarily so good at being like super pragmatic and making like decision and being hands-on. And also I think it's being able to be pragmatic hands-on, understand chaos, be able to navigate that without panicking, without being too theoretical intellectual either, but having this mix of strategic and hands-on. I think being able to use tech as well and leverage tech, I think again that's something when I hire someone, I would want to make sure like they don't spend time doing manual work that could be leveraged by tech and automation. So being super focused on that. And then being able to understand like how like processes work in a startup, which is not having heavy process compared to some like bigger companies. So I think if you do ops in startups, you definitely want to make sure you're not a blocker for the team and coming with your heavy process, which are not adapted to how a startup works. So I think that I think also be really humble, be ready to get your hands dirty, because if you come from like a bigger company or like, even if I compare to like being a lawyer where you always doing like intellectual work in like a more like fancy probably office and all, I think be just ready to adapt to startup, be humble, get your hand dirty and all. That's really important as well.
How do you think you ended up building those skills, Clementine? Because you came from law, as you were saying, and you've ended up, in operations and startups. Was it just from experience and maybe being thrown in the deep end and seeing it a few times, or what do you think allowed you to end up becoming someone who's comfortable with chaos and all of these things?
Yeah, I think there are some transferable skills. So when you're a lawyer, you're really structured, you're able to learn really quickly about like any area and about solving complex problems as well. So I think all these skills really helped me to get into it. And then I think I was just really willing to, because I was interested in innovation and startup. And so I was also willing to get my hands dirty. Like in my first company, it was a fashion startup. Sometimes I would just have to count stock and just sit with boxes of stock we received from the factory and count if we had the right number of leggings and stuff like that. And sometimes we would get a lot like more intellectual. I had to learn also how to use Excel and work with numbers, which I had not done before. So I think also be able to learn things you've never done before, learn about like finance, learn about, I also sort of had to learn about everything and learn about the industry you're in as well, because I worked in different industry. But I think if you're able to learn quickly, you can learn anything, and if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to, I guess, end on, is this willingness to learn and be curious and also be comfortable doing what needs to get done, especially in an early stage startup, because you can't be too theoretical or, not willing to go down and, I don't know, count things from a box if that's what's required on the day. You don't know what you're going to be doing. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us today, Clementine. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you to, I guess, find out more about what you discussed on this podcast, or find out about Granola or anything else, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I can share my email with you if you want to share it.
Yeah, we'll definitely put your LinkedIn link in the show notes so that people can get in touch. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps others find us. Even better, share it with a friend or colleague who needs to hear this. Thanks, and see you next time.